Previously on episode 8, helping Willie E. Knotzler prepare for his medical exam becomes a community effort. Grace gathers Ava and several others to quiz Willie. What begins as a serious study session quickly becomes filled with laughter as everyone struggles to pronounce medical terms and takes a personal interest in helping Willie succeed. Meanwhile, Frankie sits alone in a jail cell and begins remembering a time before her marriage became filled with betrayal, anger, and violence. Her thoughts take her back to her wedding day, when she and Lonnie were young, deeply in love, and believed they would spend the rest of their lives together. She is forced to ask herself how two people who once loved each other so deeply became the people they are now. Worst of all, because of what they became, their daughter Grace grew up in the middle of a war she never started. And now for Roofless, episode 9. Frankie remembers. The prison bus moved steadily down the highway. Frankie sat beside the window, her hands resting quietly in her lap, as miles of unfamiliar road disappeared behind her. She had been sentenced to 20 years before she could stand and take the first breath. Just like that, the trial was over. The lawyers had stopped arguing. The courtroom had emptied. Around her, women sat in silence. Some slept with their heads against the windows. Others stared straight ahead. One woman quietly cried into her sleeve. Frankie looked outside. For the first time in her life, she was traveling somewhere she had no choice but to go. The mansion was gone. Lonnie was gone. Grace was gone. Even her name seemed to belong to someone else now. The bus passed an exit, then another. Frankie watched trees, gas stations, and small towns blur together through the glass. She had no idea how long she had been staring when the bus slowed. A line of cars moved along a nearby road, headlights on, one after the other. Then a funeral procession. Frankie's eyes followed the cars. At the front was a black hearse. Something tightened in her chest. Suddenly she was no longer on the prison bus. She was standing outside of a church. People were hugging her. Flowers filled the entrance, and her mother was dead. The memory came so clearly that Frankie could almost smell the funeral flowers. She remembered saying the same words again and again. "Thank you for coming. Mama loved you too. Please drive safely." Again and again, Frankie smiled, hugged, and thanked people while trying to understand how the world could continue moving without her mother. Lonnie had wanted to come. At least that's what he had said. But work kept him from making the trip, leaving Frankie to face the funeral without him. She told herself she understood. Frankie had spent a great deal of her marriage telling herself she understood. The prison bus hit a bump in the road. Frankie blinked. For a moment, the barred window returned. The women, the silence, the life she had destroyed. Then she looked back toward the funeral procession, and the memory pulled her back under again. By early evening, the mourners had gone home. Her mother's house was filled with covered dishes, funeral programs, sympathy cards, flowers, and half-eaten cakes. But the woman who had made the house feel like a home was gone. Frankie sat at the kitchen table with her sister. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then her sister poured 2 cups of coffee. "Hey, Frankie, earlier today, I thought I heard you tell Diane that you and Lonnie were still trying to have a baby. Did I hear you right?" The question caught Frankie off guard. She looked down at her coffee. "No." Her sister waited. Frankie rubbed her thumb slowly across the edge of the cup. "We stopped trying." "I'm sorry, why?" Frankie shook her head. "I mean, we didn't decide to stop." Her sister lowered her cup. "Well, what happened?" Frankie took a deep breath. "I went to the doctor." Something changed in her sister's face. Frankie didn't notice. At first, I thought it was maybe just taking us longer, like it does sometimes. Some couples have a hard time having a baby sometimes. It just takes a little longer. Everybody tells you to relax, stop thinking about it, stop trying so hard. Her sister remained silent. So I did all of that. I prayed. I waited. I went to church. They prayed for us too. In fact, Pastor Murphy says we'll be blessed with a baby before the year is out. Frankie gave a small, broken laugh. Turns out, not thinking about something that doesn't make it go away. What did the doctor say? Frankie's eyes filled with tears. Sissy, he said I can't have children. Her sister slowly lowered her cup. He said there's too much damage. Damage? Yes, scarring, old tissues, surgeries. Her sister's face lost its color. Frankie shook her head. I don't understand any of it. Her sister stared at her. What do you mean you don't understand? The doctor kept asking me about surgeries I had when I was younger. He asked if I had suffered some kind of serious injury as a child. Her sister said nothing. Frankie looked at her. He said the damage didn't just happen. Something caused it. Still, her sister remained silent. Frankie frowned. What? Why the face? Oh, nothing, her sister said. That wasn't nothing. Her sister stood and carried her cup toward the sink. Frankie watched her. What aren't you telling me? Her sister turned on the faucet. Frankie stood. Look at me, sister. Her sister didn't move. Frankie's voice softened. Please. Please. Slowly, her sister turned around. There were tears in her eyes. Frankie froze. Why are you crying? Her sister looked towards the doorway, almost as though she expected their mother to walk into the room and stop the conversation. But their mother was gone, and before her went the only other person who had made everyone promise never to tell. Frankie, her sister whispered, you really don't remember? Frankie stared at her. Remember what? Her sister covered her mouth. Frankie's heart began to pound in her chest. Sissy, what are you talking about? Frankie, what happened to me, Sissy? Her sister began to cry. Frankie stepped closer. What happened to me? Just tell me. The room fell silent. Frankie was no longer thinking about Lonnie. She was no longer thinking about babies. She was thinking about a childhood she could barely remember. A father who had gone to prison. A mother who had spent years refusing to talk about why. And a family that Frankie suddenly realized knew something about her life that she did not. Her sister reached for her hand. Frankie pulled away. No. Her sister stopped. Don't touch me. Just tell me. Frankie, maybe this isn't the right time. Frankie looked around the kitchen, at the funeral flowers, the sympathy cards, at her mother's empty chair. Mama is gone. Her voice trembled. So if you know something that she would take to her grave about me, you're going to give it to me now. Her sister began to sob. Frankie stood perfectly still. Tell me what happened. Her sister looked into Frankie's eyes. You were 11 years old. The prison bus suddenly hit another bump. Frankie's eyes opened. The kitchen disappeared. The funeral flowers disappeared. Her sister disappeared. And Frankie was back on the bus. But her hands were trembling now. She looked down at them. She had spent years believing the worst day of her life was the day she shot Lonnie. But it wasn't. The worst day of her life had happened when she was 11 years old. And for most of her life, She had not even remembered it. Frankie looked around at the women seated near her before turning toward the window. The bus continued down the highway, its tires settling into a steady hum as the road became smooth again. She watched the trees blur past. For a few moments she tried to stay in the present, but the memory was not finished with her. Her sister's voice still echoed in her mind. You were 11 years old. Frankie slowly closed her eyes. The hum of the tires faded. The barred windows disappeared, and once again she was standing in her mother's kitchen, staring at her sister. What happened to me when I was 11? Frankie stepped closer. You started this, now finish it. Her sister looked toward their mother's empty chair, then back at Frankie. Her sister wiped her face. There were these boys. What boys? Her sister looked away. Just tell me what happened. They hurt you, Frankie. The room went silent. Frankie stared at her. You were badly injured. No child should have gone through what you went through. No. You were in the hospital. I would remember being in the hospital. Frankie, we thought you did. Frankie stood still. You have the wrong person. I don't, Frankie. Yes, you do. I don't believe you. Frankie. I would remember, Sissy. Her voice echoed through the kitchen. Her sister began to cry again. You had surgeries. Frankie stopped. The doctor's words returned. Old injuries, scarring, surgeries. Frankie slowly sat down. How many? I don't know. You don't know? No, I was young too. Frankie stared at the table. Did Mama know? Yes. Her sister nodded. All these years? Frankie, she thought you had suffered enough. Frankie laughed bitterly. Her sister reached for her hand. This time Frankie let her. For several minutes neither of them said anything. Then Frankie remembered something else. Daddy. What about Daddy? Her sister looked away. Frankie's heart began to pound. Sissy, what did this have to do with Daddy? Her sister closed her eyes. He found out who they were. Frankie froze. Who? The boys who hurt you. Frankie stood again. What did he do? He went after them. The room became still. Frankie stared at the woman sitting across from her. Is that why he went to prison? Her sister nodded. Frankie covered her mouth. It's like the movie A Time to Kill, except they didn't free Carly. Oh my God, my poor daddy. Oh my God. For most of her life, she had believed her father had simply disappeared. She thought he had chosen anger and violence in prison over his family. Now she understood that he had gone to prison because something had happened to his little girl. Something so terrible that she had buried it, and something so terrible that he had been willing to lose his freedom over it. The prison bus hit another bump. Frankie opened her eyes. The kitchen disappeared. Her sister disappeared. Her mother's empty chair disappeared. The bus slowed. A guard stood at the front. Listen up. We're here. Frankie looked through the window. Concrete walls rose in front of her. Fences, razor wire, a guard tower. The prison gates closed slowly. Frankie stared through the glass. Her father had once passed through gates like these. For years she'd wondered why. Now she knew. The bus moved forward. She looked down at her trembling hands. She had spent most of her life running from a past she couldn't remember. But as the prison gates closed behind her, Frankie understood something. She had nowhere left to run. And perhaps, for the first time in her life, nowhere left to hide. You have listened to episode 9 of Roofless. If you enjoyed it, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And remember, listener discretion is advised. Thank you for your support.